This is Pouring Over Lemonade with Brian and Neill, episode 2. Just a reminder to everyone, this is not financial advice. We are not your financial advisor. So keep that in mind. And we haven't verified the accuracy of any information shared here today by us or guest speakers, although we do try to be as accurate as possible. All right, so my name is Brian McCormick, and we've got Neil on here. So starting off today, I think the major news of the past week is we had a great interview between Paper Bag Investor and Mikkel Langer with Lemonade, who's the head of product and also car product, and she also led the pet product when it was growing from the early stages all the way to the massive product that it is today. So starting off, I want to talk a bit about that. Neil, did you have a chance to listen to the interview?
I did, yeah. It's really good. You want to give my thoughts now?
Yeah, go ahead. Like, what are your thoughts on it?
So if I jump straight in, I think probably the biggest thing I walked away from was how she talked about there was no new business penalty. Maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe it's not a big deal, but that sounded like a big deal. It is, right?
Yeah, I thought it was a huge deal because they've got 700,000, people on the car wait list. And the biggest problem with rolling out a new product has always been the new business penalty because you release a new product and then, the loss ratios are higher starting off. You're not able to necessarily price them as well too, causing the loss ratios to not be ideal at first. There's more claims generally in the initial period. However, if they have no bump in gross loss ratio for cross sales, that means you kind of have a lot of potential to expand the product quicker than you normally would. And it also brings a lot of strategy into play of how they want to ramp out car. And my thinking is that they want to ramp out car specifically in states with the biggest, wait list as potentially a large factor if there is no business penalty.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, and that means when we do get the new quarterly reports coming out, I kind of want to know what percent whenever we get these quarterly reports, and I'm not sure I don't think they'll say this, but I want to know what percent of the new car sales are coming from the wait list or existing customers versus what percent are coming from new first-time customers, because that kind of informs us a bit of where they are on the gross loss ratio if there's no penalty. Because if they say there's no penalty and they sign up people, right away, we kind of see what the new cohort gross loss ratio looks like without a penalty, and that gives us a good temperature in the room for where they are in gross loss ratios in general. So I think that might be a question that I think I'd like to ask and say, which those of you that aren't familiar with say is the way where investors can ask questions to Lemonade and vote with their shares, and then when they have the quarterly call, they'll try and answer that every quarter.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that I took away from this interview with Mikkel, I'm not sure, is that a I don't know either. I need to go back to the video. Apologies. But yeah, the other thing is that they're going to be conservative about it. Like, it doesn't sound like they're going to ramp it fast. And, I was sort of thinking about it almost like in the context of how, and I don't know, like maybe some people don't like the Tesla analogies, but I think it's another one that kind of makes sense here, right? Where they had to go through this phase where they were ramping up their lines. But once it was like ramped, you saw like a pretty significant surge in growth. And so I feel like once they get to that point where all of auto is like totally feature complete and they can like really open the doors. Cause I think what they're doing right now, the sense I get is that they're really going after customers that they probably already know present very low risks to like maybe be achieving this. I'm not really sure, but I'm just thinking maybe that's a possibility. And because they just have so many on the wait list, you get these like early big wins. It could be the case. So I'd be sort of curious to know more, but I don't know if we'll ever get that info.
Yeah, an area where I'd like more information is exactly how they are able to achieve the lower new business penalty for these cross sale customers. Is it primarily because telematics is like customers had it opted in. They were like given the option to opt in, and they opted in, and then Lemonade got the data, and then they were able to price it great from the start. Is that the primary reason? Because in the interview, I don't believe they Mikhail said what the primary reason was. There's an
Sorry, the primary reason for
not having the business penalty, for being able to
oh,
price it quite well. And the reason why I want to know, is it because they're tracking telematics, or is it because that they're tracking telematics earlier on those customers or not, like they were on renters and they opted in, or if it's something else? Because if it's something else, then that's quite interesting. So there's another idea in AI, basically with embeddings, and Upstart, another company I'm invested in, also does this, where they're able to take one group of data and correlate it to be similar to another type of group of data. So for instance, if potentially if Lemonade were to take a group of factors that they know about you, let's say it's like 10 factors, something about the way you communicate with the app, the way you use the app, um, your history as a pet owner, for instance, and they can take like 8 or 10 things that they know, and then they can say, because we know these 8 or 10 things about you, you're very, very likely to also have these things true about you when it comes to your driving behavior. And
yep.
if they're able to figure out that, then that is a huge boost, because it means, the telematics, they need the telematics still in order to be able to link the two together. But if they have the two, then that means that they can do this without a new business penalty, and without having to necessarily enable the telematics for you right away. Although I assume, you still want the telematic data.
Yeah. It was interesting as well to hear that there are just some states that require you to have a device. That was the impression I got. Is that your understanding as well when she talked about that part of it?
Yeah, so it sounded like, basically each state, right, has its own regulations and requirements. So some states may require you to have certain device. And the other observation that I got from this interview, is that Lemonade doesn't know exactly what is going to be the number one way for insurance companies to get the best telematic data. It could be that cell phones are able to get 99% of the data that you need to price risk to rate properly. Like it could just be all, like the phone is good enough. And in some cases, the phone is actually definitely better, because it can tell distracted driving if you're like, texting on your phone when you should be driving, right? And things like that. So there are definite advantages, but they don't know if that's necessarily going to be the main thing. It could be that these devices, and I forget the name of the device, these devices that plug into the car, it could be that those just provide more nuanced data, and that data ends up being superior in the long run. Or it could be that even if it doesn't end up superior, it could be that certain states where they want to operate in may require those devices anyways, because that's the prerogative of the state regulators, that they want to do those devices.
Yeah.
So essentially, they want to be device agnostic here, so that they can, go whichever way things go. Whatever the standard becomes, they have a foot in the door, because you don't want to, be 100% phone use if, regulators somehow decide to go a certain way, or you don't want to lose a state because you haven't developed the algorithms to price risk to rate for the
Mhm.
technology required in the state. So I think, that was a good, I didn't know about this prior to the interview, but I
Yeah.
thought that was a good learning.
Yeah. I like how she also reinforced that all the magic is happening behind the scenes, sort of regardless of the data source. And how that sort of like feeds into everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have a few other highlights here. Let's see, that I want to read through. Yeah, so all right. One concern people might have is driver versus passenger detection. And that was a question, because let's say your spouse or whoever wants to use your phone while you're driving the car, right? And they want to send a text or something, or watch a YouTube video. Obviously, if you're the driver, you don't want to have a panic attack because you think your rates are gonna go up because someone is texting on your phone, and your phone is being used for telematics. And the way it generally works, according to Mikkel in the interview, is that um, it looks at the statistical overall probability over time. It doesn't look at just one instance of one event. It's looking for a pattern of behavior that is consistent. So if there's like one instance of doing something, it's not going to count it against you because it doesn't have a strong signal yet that they're 100% certain that that's your driving behavior. But if it's a consistent behavior, then it's something that might affect your risk rate. So so that's something that I thought was interesting. You know, I think people might be a little bit, you know, some people might be a little bit OCD about letting people use their phone and things like that if they're using telematics for that. But it seems like you don't have to worry about that too much. At the same time, it does seem like they're still evolving this kind of technology because based on that, I mean, you obviously don't want someone using your phone every time you drive because then it's just not going to get the telematic data that it really needs because it seems like, well, you're always on your phone when you're driving. So there is still a little bit there that you know, it's not perfect.
Yeah. I remember she also talked about how there were just a few characteristics that put people in like the worst percent of drivers. And they just really had to weed those out. Actually, I can't remember if she said that, if I heard that from a root interview,
Yeah,
but
no,
they're sort of following that principle as far as I'm aware.
yeah, and I've heard that. I don't know this because I'm not an actuary or anything, but I have seen that circulated a lot online. For instance, Root, the CEO of Root, talks about how you know one of their sole goals is identifying the bad drivers, and almost all of it is just trying to identify the 10% of bad drivers because those are the ones who overwhelmingly drive up the rates for everyone else. So if you're not really focusing on the good drivers, you're just focusing on the 10% bad, and that's because the bad drivers are like, you know, if you think in terms of like home policies, like you have the huge tail risks, which are, you know, like, you know, severe cat events and things like that. That's kind of like what bad drivers are. And the difference between like, you know, good drivers and medium drivers is probably on a cost basis, average is not a huge deal, is what it seems like. So according to the Root CEO, it's about identifying the bad drivers. And I have seen from other people posting that are in the insurance space that they believe that telematics often comes down to like a handful of factors that they're just trying to identify as best as they can. Um, and that's kind of interesting because if telematics in the future becomes something where you just have to identify like eight or 10 or 12 factors, and then you kind of are able to price it, and there's really no more from the telematics side, then that kind of means that telematics becomes a bit of a commodity as long as your customers are using it, in which case automation starts becoming the biggest factor for how you create an advantage versus other insurance companies. Because if you all have the same kind of risk to rate pricing based on telematics, the advantage comes down to how efficient you are at being able to serve customers, which I think Lemonade has better than anyone else in the industry.
Yeah, I kind of wonder what are like the main roadblocks from them holding up the car product, right? Like, how, what are the different handoff points into like the real world, right? As far as garages and I guess in like sort of surveyors, what any other points you can think of that really need to be sort of covered?
It seems I have to find the quote from the interview, but it seems like Mikkel, she had said that you know they have the app that kind of looks at the best um, places for repairing vehicles and things like that, and somehow that they're actually pretty advanced in that. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back to the interview, but I believe there was something along those lines. So perhaps there's some technology involved where, you know, they kind of are able to identify the shops that give people the best pricing and things like that. But that is an area where traditional insurers tend to have an advantage. They and tend to perhaps have more pricing power with local shops. So that is something that it, it's a reason why perhaps you don't want to expand in all 50 states at once. You kind of want to do it state by state so you can build up your understanding of all the local shops and things like that and services rather than spread yourself then over a distance where you know you would be dealing with a lot more shops rather than a concentrated number of them.
Yeah.
Well,
I think,
I think another thing that's takes some time is they're trying different variables, right? So they have different customer experiences. They have different like things that they're trying, and those take time to run, 6 months, a year, and they need to get the data back to make a decision on what the right, product and experience is going forward.
yeah, they said they really amped up their rate filing numbers as well, right? So I kind of wonder if that's a push on them as well, from them as well, to try to get more rate precision. I don't know if that's something that they're working on, but I kind of hope it is, in the sense that, I mean, I'm not sure how to break it down right now, actually, but I hope they're getting more and more granular. It sort of makes sense.
Yeah, and I think some things are probably going to be like state by state or location by location, and some things are going to be, common across all locations, like the app experience, and generally the telematics data can come from any source, right? They're trying the OBD reader as well as the app to see which is a better experience.
Yeah, another thing that stuck out to me is Mikkel used the word feature complete. She said car will be
Oh
feature
yeah, yeah,
complete for 2025, and then 2026 is kind of like the go year. So that tells me they're still building out whatever the core product is. They're getting close, and like this year it's going to be done, and then next year they feel comfortable really ramping it. I mean, obviously we do see some ramping this year. We do see them expanding into new states, Colorado, Indiana, and my kind of feeling from watching or listening to the interview is that they're really trying to learn everything that they can this year, and they're trying to be very thoughtful in their rollout, because the way that they roll out can have big impacts down the road, and they want to learn as much as they can at this stage, because once you invite everyone that's in your app in a specific state to upgrade to car, it's kind of like you have your first impression or your first offer, and that potentially that could be like the most important one. So they want to really be thoughtful about the way that they do that. And there was a lot of information, like in the interview, they talked about, when do you offer a telematic savings? Like if Lemonade sees, you've been driving super safe and they can price you cheaper, when do you offer the discount? And what was interesting is that, as a consumer, we kind of think, well, just offer it to me right away, right? Like I want the discount right away. I want to save money, but that's not necessarily the best way to go about it, because some people they don't like change. I think that's a common human characteristic, is change can cause people stress, and that was a word that my
yeah,
Michelle used it. She said customers can stress out, and their expectations. Setting customer expectation is very important in business. And if customers have the expectation that in the middle of policy that you reduce rates, maybe you reduce my rates in the next policy renewal halfway through, right? Like, and then they're like, well, why didn't I get a discount this time? I think I've been driving even safer, right? Um,
yeah.
so
Changing it too much.
yeah, so changing things too much can be bad, even though it saves the customer money. They're not comfortable with that. So, according to the interview, the best point appears to be to change it once the policy is up for renewal, and then they see, oh, I get a new cheaper rate, so I'm definitely going to renew with Lemonade, and I get the safe driving kind of telematic price. So I thought that was interesting, because that's not something I think about, and I think it kind of shows the level of thought that Lemonade, because that's kind of looking behind the scenes of
Yeah,
Lemonade product, the things that they think about in pricing. They're putting a lot of effort into understanding the customer and what's going to ultimately lead to the happiest customer, the best net promoter score, and the best deal for both the customer and themselves.
Yeah, I wonder if there's also an element of like gamifying it. I don't know if that's, I don't kind of like that word for this, but um, if it shows, hey, we're gonna have a check-in in 1 month, or we're gonna have a check-in on your pricing in 6 months, you kind of are motivated to try to drive safer, and it constantly reminds you that how you drive matters, and so you're more aware of it versus a policy that's 6 months or a year long, you're not really thinking about that type of stuff. They haven't really spoken to that too much, but I think there's some sort of psychology there where people will
Yeah,
drive better.
absolutely. Yeah, I think this is a interesting angle to think about it from, where they're sort of able to shape behavior, right? I think with the pet insurance, they send reminders to people as far as what they should be doing with their pets and like enforcing good habits. So they take them to the vet regularly, things like that. So, in many ways, I do wonder to what extent the app will be able to also influence people's behavior to make them drive safer, to make them more consciously aware of, I don't know, various things, I guess.
Yeah, it's got to help at some level.
I think there's also another benefit to Lemonade having always on telematics. A lot of competitors, they only do like the first 2 weeks. So you use the telematics product for 2 weeks, they understand how you drive, and then they set your pricing based on that. But Lemonade has always on, and I think that kind of helps protect the business against people that try and gamify too much, in that, for 2 weeks, maybe I can drive a little bit safer than I normally would, right? Because, oh, I've got my telematic device on. I want to get the best risk to rate. I better fully stop at every stop sign, make sure I'm super smooth in driving. Don't want to drive too aggressive, pass a bunch of people up. Maybe people can change their behavior for 2 weeks, but people can't change. People are less likely, I will say, to change their behavior over a sustained period of time. They'll either drive better because they feel like that's important for them, or they'll just revert to how they normally drive. And by having the telematics always on, maybe like for the first 6 months of their policy, they're kind of able to fool the system with the first 2 weeks and look like a good driver when they aren't. But then when the renewal period comes up, then Lemonade can be, well, we kind of actually know that after your 2 week period, you kind of drove a little bit riskier than your current pricing. So this is your new pricing. So I think that's potentially a good benefit versus these other shorter programs.
Yeah, and I think they take their time with that as well, right? So it's not. I think the point that I got from her was that they have to do it in such a way where it just doesn't feel too jarring, right? And I think there are also limitations as far as how much they can raise the prices mid policy.
Yeah, and every state is going to be different because they all have their regulations. Um, I think every state having their own regulations is it's partly tough for an industry because you have to keep track of all of these different states, and it's like an extra fixed cost. But it's also a benefit for companies that can utilize AI, because if you think about AI, it's all about doing things quicker and faster. And one of the things Lemonade is focused on is creating automated processes to be really quick on things. And one thing they did is, they want to be able to do rate filings quicker. So, with their new what was it called, like low code local system, it helps them, it enables them to do filings quicker, and that means that they can update their pricing and be quicker in each state. You've got 50 states. That's a lot of rate requests um, for multiple products that you have to submit, every few months. And being able to automate, a good chunk of the manual labor in that just increases their ability to keep their rate to risk more updated than other companies for their size. Other companies like Progressive, they might be able to do that. They're able to do that because they just spend a ton of money on overhead, whereas Lemonade is doing it by leveraging automation, which means that as Lemonade scales, they're just much more OpEx light than Progressive or Geico or State Farm.
Yeah, we don't have too much visibility in their infrastructure for that type of communication with regulation. I'm sure they're building it out, but it would be interesting to find out more how they're being efficient with building that infrastructure. Because I imagine right now it's pretty manual because you are expanding to new states and you're trying to build that for the long term. But obviously, like you said, long term, they'll automate all this.
I wonder how much more they can automate as a result of like Grok 4 or the latest LLMs. And they probably have some kind of advanced view of what OpenAI's offering is, I would imagine, because I think they're kind of one of their lead developers. Is that, you said, that's the right way to frame it? It's almost kind of like a they're not an OpenAI developer per se, but they're like an LLM developer, right? Just doing it for insurance. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not. Go ahead.
Oh, you're talking about the partnership, right? Where OpenAI demoed the use of their LLM.
Yeah.
LMND? Yeah, yeah. Well, I think they're just a customer, right? They're using the protocol, and of course, OpenAI wants to support their customers.
Yeah, that's true.
Before we move on, I wanted to go more into. So this is the loco from Shai Winiger's post last week on July 8th. And here's what he said. With loco, our team can rapidly build new products, launch states, iterate on pricing and underwriting, and experiment with various dynamic experiences all in hours instead of weeks and without touching any code. So that's kind of like very generic and broad scope, but you can see, that touches a lot of things. It's touching building products, launching states, iterate on pricing and underwriting. And that's the part, iterating on pricing and underwriting makes me assume, I could be incorrect here, but it makes me assume that that's talking about rate filings. So.
And you think that's being automated now with loco?
I think parts of it are being able to be automated, and he does say all in hours instead of weeks. So I assume there was like manual process for that where a lot of that had to be manually done, and now it's minimally done. I mean, my view of AI now is, you have like a project manager, and basically now they can pretty much speed things up and do everything on themselves rather than having to rely on people below you to spend hours and hours doing kind of generally manual composition and things like that.
You got to think about the other side of things for the regulator or the state. As there is more automation, they're going to be potentially flooded with more requests. Like, I don't know how often Geico would send in, a price adjustment, but you can't imagine it's too often. But if Lemonade's sending them in more often, and there's more competitors that are using automation, the state now needs to either hire more people, be backlogged, or use automation. And I imagine that could start to become a bit of a bottleneck for everyone, though.
Yeah, I can see that, and I don't think regulators get get a ton of budget allocated to them. It does, yeah, but it's also, companies. There's companies that are big that are going to file rate requests more often because they have the resources to do that, and then there's companies that are automated. So yeah, I mean, it depends. There's a lot of new insurtechs coming out that are trying to automate things, and they probably focus on certain states. So I can see certain states perhaps being a little overwhelmed in areas while AI unfolds. That's a good point.
Yeah, the thing I most common see in sort of scrutiny with their car program is that everyone else uses telematics. And what, like, did you get any information as far as why their approach is very unique?
I didn't feel like I got a sense that the biggest thing was Investor Day, where Daniel basically explained, the CEO of Lemonade basically explained telematics is always on for Lemonade, and that's generally rare in the industry. And on my end, I believe that's largely true because most of the cohorts or customers of legacy businesses are not customers that are first time. They're usually older customers, and they're used to doing things the way that they normally do, which is not telematics. They've always signed up for car insurance without telematics. They probably think, why do I need telematics? I don't want to sign up for this new thing. What if my rates go up? Even if their rates would only go down, they're probably thinking, what if my rates go up? I don't like new technology. I don't like doing new stuff. I never had to do it before. I think that's kind of like the general mindset of a lot of those. So I think the telematics always on is focused more on first time cohorts. Anyone can do that, in my opinion, but it's focused more on first time cohorts, which lends itself to a business like Lemonade, which is getting first time cohorts and things like renters where they can cross sale over to car. and their whole app and experience is going to be focused on driving people into the telematic program for car versus the legacy. It's like they want to drive it, but it's not 100% focused because they do have so many legacy customers that just don't want to do that. But I don't see telematics as there are going to be advances that some companies have. Maybe Lemonade has an advance there. I think automation is going to be potentially a big player in car. I see the ability to embed their Lemonade's data and correlate that to telematics as a big area. Whereas if the same 10 points about car telematics that identify bad drivers are true, perhaps Lemonade has a big advantage in that they collect way more data on customers like renters than other insurance companies do for those same customers. And if Lemonade has all that data and they can correlate that to the telematics, that's an advantage that they have that the other companies don't have, in addition to all their automation.
I would say that, like, I think there will be an advantage on telematics, but not by a tremendous amount. Except for they also have, because they have continuous, right? They have crash detection. So when it comes to a claim, they have like undisputedly a huge advantage over everyone else. They know exactly what went down during that accident. And so that's just going to kind of help them, file that claim much faster, and accurately. And then the other one that with continuous telematics is the pay per mile, right? No one else can do that unless you have continuous telematics. But as for like the driving score and all that, I don't think like 2 weeks of Lemonade's data versus 2 weeks of a competitor's data is probably going to give you pretty similar score on a driver.
Yeah, that's true. And where I think Lemonade has an advantage potentially there is, with new cohorts, I feel like Lemonade is a better brand for new cohorts than Progressive and State Farm. It's just their design, their company, the give back, everything that they do, it appeals more to first time customers than a lot of these legacy archaic companies, in my opinion. Domian,
And-
I see
Yeah.
you had your hand out. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, I just wanted to add that what stood out to me in the interview was when they were discussing the OBD device and the phone sensors. So which one they used, and basically the answer was they can use whatever data they can get their hands on. So they can plug in a device in the car. They can use the phone sensors. Maybe in the future the cars will send data to Lemonade itself. And I think in order to enable that, they must have built a very flexible system that allows any input to be used in order to price risk. And then, of course, there's always the question of can they use all those inputs in their pricing model for the customer? Are they allowed by regulators to assess risk based on all those inputs? And sometimes they aren't, right? In some states, there's regulation limiting what they can use in their pricing models. But even then, they still have the data and they still know about all these customers, like what their real risk is. And even if they cannot match price to that real risk, they then can use it in their marketing efforts, right? And maybe if there's a customer that's actually not very profitable, then they can decide not to try to cross-sell any other products to them. So it's always a limiting factor, the regulations, and they cannot use all the data that they have to get their pricing right, but still they can use it for marketing. So that's another benefit they can have, or advantage they can have over the competition. It's sort of invisible data that they have, data that they cannot use in their pricing model, but still they can use it to inform their marketing decisions.
Yeah, on the point of sort of working with regulators, I think that this is sort of like one bearish thing that I've been thinking about. I'm not the originator of this thought. I've heard others talk about it, and it's really the incumbents pushing on regulators to slow Lemonade down, and we've seen that with EVs. Like all the legacy autos are really working in Washington to kind of keep the ICE cars going, and I don't. think we've heard too much about that in this industry, but it's coming. And I think that's just going to slow things down a little bit. It's never long-term bearish, but I think it could be bearish for the short-term stock. I don't know when that's going to come, but incumbents are definitely going to push back.
They did set up that, that insurance body, right, to deal with this. I'm not sure if it's had made any progress, but
who set that up?
It's there. Lemonade is like, they're in like some kind of cohort, not cohort, like group with other insurance companies to deal with some of the regulators, or at least lobby for them. I think that's my understanding of it.
Got it. But imagine like we have live stream of data coming into a Lemonade customer, and Lemonade's like, yeah, let's act on that right away. The incumbent's like, well, we don't have that data source, so no, that's not allowed.
Yeah, so even if that happens, then they will only be able to prohibit them using it in their pricing. But even so, they will still have the data, and then they can use it to price new customers, or at least price them behind the scenes, if you understand what I mean. So maybe it's not the actual price that they can charge the customer, but still they know what their actual risk is better than the competitors who don't have the data. And then they can use that to inform their marketing and maybe go after that type of customer more, or cross-sell them or upsell them more, if their internal model shows that these are really profitable customers, even though maybe in their filings or in their rate increases or rate filings, they cannot include everything in their pricing model because it's not allowed. Even if that's the case, they can still use all the data that they have. And if it's more than the competitors, then they will still have an advantage just by being able to select more precisely the most profitable customers.
Fully agree with that. I think that incumbents are going to try to push back on technology where it hurts the most, to slow Lemonade and those AI competitors down. And this could be even like 10 years away when they start to lose market share. I don't think it's happening right now, but they're going to fight tooth and nail to not lose business when it's obvious that they're losing business.
This is why I'm very much in support of them doubling down on pet and renters, because I think they get so much data from that as far as the customer and their behaviors that it really gives them a huge opportunity to cross-sell for very cheap.
What's wild to me is that Lemonade has said, I always viewed the EU as, they've always been stricter on regulation. But when it comes to renter policies, and I assume home off of renters as well, that the EU is much more allowant of AI to price risk to rate. I don't know, Domian, you're in the EU, correct? Do you have any insights into, the feeling or attitude toward using AI to price risk to rate for insurance in Europe? And is there any attitude around telematics or car in specific, or is that just like a renter specific area?
Yeah, I'm in the EU, but I think for now that it's mostly country by country regulated. I'm not sure about any EU regulations, but I'm definitely not an expert in that, so I might be wrong. But I think for now it's sort of managed country by country. And as far as I know, in Belgium, there's very little use of telematics. I do have sort of a pay-per-mile car policy, but that just works once a year. I have to send in the mileage of the car, and then they calculate like just a new premium based on how much I drove in the past year. So for all I know, that's what we have right now. No continuous telematics, but I'm definitely not an expert on regulation, and I might not know all the offerings by competitors.
I've seen like influencers like Matteo in the insurance space talk about telematics in Europe a lot, and seems to be excited for a lot of the telematic uses out there. Do you think Lemonade can be competitive in Europe? Is there any reason why Lemonade can't move to Europe? Are there certain characteristics where that's just hard for them to do, or do you think that could be a possibility in the future?
Well, for car, you mean? Because they're already in Europe, right? For some products.
For renters and home, I wasn't aware that they were for car.
Yeah, no, they're not here for car yet. Yeah, I think for sure it's possible. I mean, the cars we drive are the same as the ones in the US, except maybe overall a bit smaller. Um, but I think like the road system is very similar, and so I think the data they collect in the US should also be able to inform their pricing decisions here in Europe. Um, yeah, if it's whether it's possible for them to come here, sure. But I think they first have a very big market in the US to attack, and once they're comfortable there, then maybe they can expand. I think for car, it is a bit um, more hands-on than for maybe pets or renters. I think it's easier to expand those because you don't really need as much boots on the ground, if you know what I mean. I think maybe in they're in France. I think they only have renters there, and if I remember correctly, they have hardly any employees in France. So I think for car that would be different. I think you need more local partnerships with repair shops. I think that was also discussed in the recent interview with Paperback, and then also for pricing and to get the regulators to approve everything. I think you need to put in a bit more effort than for pet and renters, because after all, like car. Yeah, is also about safety, right? You need to be able to cover the damages if someone gets hurt in an accident. And so I think regulators are probably a bit tougher for that product than for pet or renters. So yeah, it's definitely possible, but it will be quite a bit of work as they expand into Europe for car. And I think they will only do that once they have everything going fine in the US, and they need extra room for expansion. And for now, the US market is still so vast for them that it's not really a priority, I would think. But
Yeah.
hey, if they're here tomorrow, great. Then I can become a Lemonade customer.
I like how she described it as a wild horse, right? Like things can go really well, but they can also go really badly, right? So it just sort of reinforces why it makes so much sense for them to sort of be very measured about rolling it out.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a great analogy. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a coughing coughing child in the back.
Oh, good. Yeah. So I noticed from the expansion into Europe for renters, I mean, there was a couple of reasons why. I know we're switching a little bit here from car, but one of the reasons why I think they did that is there's two. One, they said it's because it's reduces their risk because there's less kind of there's less of a similarity in cat events and overall less cat events in Europe than there are in the US. So we have like the northeastern storms and kind of predictable, I mean, somewhat predictable areas of concern in the US with climate change and things like that. Whereas in Europe, it's a little bit of a different risk pattern and potentially less for cat events, was my understanding. And that means it's attractive for diversifying their risk by season, at least. And the other thing is, I think, there's only so many renters policies you can sell. Eventually, you won't be able to grow renters. They're already like number one for like the past 2-3 years, at least. They're already number one for first-time renters under 35. There's only so many renters that are going to graduate from staying at their parents' house or being in college to being first-time renters. There's only so many people that graduate to become renters every year. And if Lemonade has kind of like the near maximum share that you can get based on their whatever factors, then it helps for them to expand into other markets. And Europe is potentially one, which they've done, that allows them to keep growing and not slow down in their renter policy growth. So that's why I see them, or why they've said basically that they're expanding in Europe. I think Europe has some challenges that they have to overcome. I think the building profiles are quite a bit different than the U.S. because the U.S. we tend to have newer buildings, whereas in Europe, there's a lot more old buildings that are structurally different. Although that might offset some of the cat differences. So it's a different set of problems too.
Yeah, there's definitely less cat in the EU. We basically don't have hurricanes, no earthquakes. Floods are happening sometimes. Maybe that will increase due to climate change. But yeah, it's definitely lower cat risk in Europe than it is in the US. So better for diversification of risk.
So are you saying I should move to Europe, Damian?
I don't know how many languages do you speak, because English alone won't cut it here.
It won't. Can I just pretend to be a tourist all year long?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Anything else, Neil? You want to move on from car? Are there anyone wants to talk about their car?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, 'cause I mean, other people have mentioned this, but it was sort of like seeing her excitement. I think this is one of those non-numbers things where you could tell she was excited about the product, and I think that does mean a lot.
And we got the best person for it, right? We killed it in renters
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
pet. She came from
Yeah,
pet,
oh
right?
yeah, that as well, right? She was responsible for the renters product, right? And that's
No,
doing
pet. Yeah. She was doing pet before,
pet,
and yeah,
pet
I talked to her quite a lot at the investor day. And what
Oh,
stood out
nice.
to me back then was really her enthusiasm about the car product and about Lemonade in general. She was really very optimistic. Of all the people I spoke to, all the employees and management, she was actually the most like energetic and yeah, really enthusiastic about the potential of the car product and Lemonade in general. So I'm maybe that came across in the interview as well. I hope it did, because it really gave me a lot of confidence that they will figure out car, even though they're at it for quite a few years already. I mean, when they bought Metromile, I didn't think it would take as much time after that to really get the product going. So yeah, in that regard, I was a bit disappointed that it took so long. But seeing them so enthusiastic, and her especially, really gives me confidence that they are figuring it out. And yeah, the coming years will be very exciting, I think.
Yeah. Well,
If I'm not mistaken, they have something like access to 40% of the US market now with the states that they're currently live in. Is that the right number, Brian? Do you remember?
I believe that sounds like the right number.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot, right? And if their wait list is 700,000, that covers a lot of people.
My feeling is with the waitlist though is that it's mostly from customers, um, excluding Colorado and Indiana, which are new, are probably from states that they're not currently offering. Because I assume they'd be off the waitlist kind of as soon as they enter that state, right?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think I might be on the wait list as well, actually, because I remember at some point they did do like some sort of form where you could add your email address to the waiting list for car, and I did that back then, even though Lemonade isn't even operating in my country yet. So I'm not really sure about the number of people on the car waiting list. That might be a lot of customers where Lemonade doesn't even operate. So, or not customers, but people in places where Lemonade doesn't operate. So I wouldn't really look at that number too much. Yeah, because I might be there.
Here's another answer. I was on the car waiting list in California, and I never got an email to say, "Hey, you can now." But I was able to go on the website and try to get car insurance. So they never utilized the mailing list yet, even though I was in a state that they could. And it was just too expensive. I guess I'm a high
Yeah,
risk
a
driver.
little bit of a tricky thing is that on their website, they do say which states they officially are available in. But what we found is that they are actually operating.
I am curious what everyone thinks of the ads, the social media ads, that Jake posted. Um, I I thought they were doing a really great job of engaging ads, and I'm sure they're A/B testing them for the most receptive ads. I'm curious what everyone thought of those ads. I'm not in
Yeah.
the marketing space, but to me they
Yeah,
seem
for
really good.
everyone joining us today who did not catch the first episode, um, which was called Squeezing the Lemonade, which we had to change for some reason or another. Yeah, we covered the ads, the new ads that they've done. So I recommend everyone check those out. I think we talked about it for like a good 30 minutes. So sorry,
Hello, can you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you, Tim. I don't think you can hear us. I don't
Yeah,
know if
no, Tim, can you hear me? Because Brian was speaking, but apparently you can't hear him.
Yeah, that's the impression I got. I just Tim, I just muted you there very quickly because I think, can you unmute yourself? Possible?
All right, well, let's move on a bit. If anyone wants to DM Tim, so that just let him know that we weren't able to hear him, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I think now's a good time to talk about Metro Mile because we did have a few points that were brought up there. First, before I say that, I do want to echo what Domien said that I think Michelle did a very good job with the interview. This was, I believe, her first public-facing interview for Lemonade. I believe it is.
I
And
think so. Yeah.
and I did.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, I did talk with her as well. Domien talked with her at Investor Day, and I talked with her as well. And it was very nice to be able to have some interaction with the Lemonade team and really understand their culture and their team and how they go about things and how they think. And I thought it was a very good interview. So I want to compliment her. She went into a lot of great details. Obviously she can't give away their secret sauce and talk about everything, but it was a very candid interview. I felt like we got to see very authentic answers. And I appreciate Daniel and Shai giving opportunity to other members of the Lemonade team to interact with the Lemonade community and do these interviews. I know Mikhail also took over for Shai Shai was on vacation for the last quarterly call. And
Oh, was that her?
yeah, and that was her who kind of took over for Shai's part and went over some things. So, I like seeing leadership development. It's always a good sign for a business when they feel comfortable delegating things to their senior team. So I like seeing that, and that was good. Moving to the Metro Mile acquisition. Yeah, I mean, there was, on face value, it is quite a good acquisition in that they got tons of data and they got it for basically zero cost, although there are some tail claim costs with policies that were mispriced because of inflation. And I think that's what really slowed down this acquisition from Lemonade, just like being out the door really quick, was two things. One was inflation in 2022 was very, very massive. It affected a lot of businesses. That was one of the problems where Metro Mile had to be sold, is their policies just became not very profitable anymore because they were mispriced due to the changes in inflation. They weren't prepared for that change. And we kind of see that across the board in insurance companies. No one was price correct for inflation. You have to adjust.
Yeah.
And they don't have a massive balance sheet. They would have had to done like an equity raise or something, and they sold instead. So that's one thing, is inflation. The other thing is that Lemonade decided they could have rolled with the Metro Mile product and just kept growing Metro Mile and using their back end and using their systems, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted to do one, and I think this was definitely 100% the right thing to do. They wanted to do one central system through Lemonade where everything communicates together, and that is their advantage over other insurance systems. Other companies like Geico have 600 systems. They don't always communicate with each other. And that creates problems over decades of time where you have different systems stack up and data is not clean and you create tech debt. And Lemonade, being a new innovative company, they want to keep everything lean and as efficient as possible. So basically, they want to take the learnings and the data from Metro Mile, but import it into the Lemonade system and the Lemonade product, which they're still building out. So that slowed down kind of, they didn't just launch in all 50 states. And my other understanding was that a lot of people, I believe, assume that because they got licenses from Metro Mile for like basically every state, Lemonade on their side could just launch in every state. But my understanding is that was not true, because Lemonade wants to do everything through the Lemonade system and the Lemonade app and all of their stuff. They actually have to get licenses approved for each state for Lemonade versus Metro Mile, and that kind of means that they can't just operate and go in any state when they want to. So,
How many more states do you think we'll get this year?
What was it? We got 2 this year, maybe another 2 to 3 to go, right?
Yeah, sounds about right. I would kind of hope for more, but I totally understand why they do why they are taking this slowly. So
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial reason why you would want to do as many states as you can is you get to convert all those wait lists with no penalty.
right.
But you can go deep in a state versus going wide in many states, because if you go deep, there's still a lot of customers in a state. Yeah, and I imagine they're also targeting customers for pet and renters. They want to focus on the states they're about to launch products. So there's a lot of interconnectedness in strategy and moving pieces. So you want to, if there's a state you really think would be great for car, you probably want to focus your renters ads and pet ads in those states too, so you can upsell them.
Yeah. I described it this way during the conversation I had with Daniel about I think I didn't use the right word here, but I said the character profiles of people where they can like learn about them, learn about who they are as a person to understand better whether or not they're a customer they want to cross sell to, upsell to. I mean, he said that much, but not the earlier part of the character. Like he said, he wouldn't describe it that way, but I'm sure there's something as far as how much data they're able to capture to understand whether or not this person represents a higher risk than an ordinary person. And they just know very quickly they don't want to insure that person, or they've got to jack up the rate or whatever it may be. What do you think? Do you think how much data do you think they have that gives them that edge to sort of find out whether or not this is a person they want to insure and at what rate?
I don't know. I think that, that's kind of on Lemonade's proprietary side. I don't have an answer to that right away. Do you, Neil? Do you think you have an idea?
No, I think that's the gap we're missing. We're going on a lot of trust, right, of the people and the team. But I mean, it's a management team that I trust has the competency based on what we've seen from renters to really pull this off. And everything they're telling us about where the business is, and we talked about this before as far as like their ability to sort of foresee the future with this platform that they have, right? It's essentially just a large dashboard that Daniel can kind of look at on his laptop, and there's this huge business sort of behind it, right? But it's really all just numbers. And so it's just a matter of sort of letting the numbers play themselves out. And I don't think it takes like a Herculean effort to do that. And so even given the technologies that they've got, whether it be, very disparate across different state regulations and whatnot, it's still enough to really push them over the edge. And again, I think the key thing is, I don't know of another insurer that has this sort of data set where you've got continuous telematics connected to all sorts of other behavioral stuff. And I think that really gives them, or it's going to give them, a big edge in auto.
Yeah.
I don't know when we're going to see that, but I just think over time, when you combine that with automation, it just gives a lot of room for this product to do really well.
Yeah, my initial bull case has always been Lemonade has the ability to connect and accrue more data than any other competitors. A lot of competitors have processes that are through agents, like State Farm is basically exclusive through agents. And a lot of those interactions are not logged cleanly, whereas all interactions with Lemonade are basically logged and available. And that data can be interpreted with other data. So they're collecting way more data than anyone else that is has the potential to be structured, whereas other companies have a lot of unstructured data or aren't collecting it at all. Like when you call up an insurance agent and say something, I believe most of that is not being structured and written down or anything like that, to where it can be used as information later on. All right, well,
yeah. And I was just going to say some of the numbers that PB cited in the interview as well, as far as the adoption, like they're incredibly lopsided. So it kind of just really makes you wonder how are the legacy insurers getting a good solid stream of data that's giving them clear direction about what to do with the business. Because I think one of the other things that I love about, I don't be fawning or whatever, but what's great about the business is they almost like every decision is made data driven. And so, they're not leaving a lot to judgment, I think, you know, this is based on like some of the principles I've heard from Daniel sort of reiterate time and again, as far as, you know, how they try to run things.
Well, and I think early they had to somewhat guess or use their tribal knowledge, and maybe that's why the loss ratios were higher. But now they have enough data that every decision can be data driven.
Yep, and that's reflected in the gross loss ratio. Basically, we see when they launch new products, generally the gross loss ratio will be higher because they're starting with generic data, and then as they build their own data set, they're able to price things better, and that's why renters is, for instance, now it's like we believe is in the 40% gross loss ratio range, which is amazing. It's been reported in the low 50% officially before. So, these high frequency claims, Lemonade's able to build their data much quicker and be able to price things better. All right, well, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I know you're trying. I know you're trying to drop. Sorry. I had a bad connection earlier. I wanted to see if you guys had any input on the ads that Jake posted earlier from the social media ads. I thought they were really good, but I wanted to get your guys' feedback.
You're referring to the ones with the kids in the office? Is that the one? Is that the right set?
Oh no, there were 4 ads posted, and they were all like TikTok type of ads. So they were sort of first person doing like a vlog style in a car.
Oh, really? Okay, no, I don't think I've seen that one. Brian, have you seen that one?
No, I haven't seen this. When was this posted, Tim?
It was in the last 2 days, and I believe it was in our community. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, I haven't.
But I thought they were really good. They were like, you wouldn't realize they're an ad right away necessarily. And Jake is saying that he was able to go on the Meta platform and see all the ads that Lemonade offers, and there were hundreds of them, and these were just a sample of them.
Yeah, I think Lemonade is very talented. They're kind of like, I credit Hims a lot for how clever they are in their marketing. And I think Lemonade is also very good at marketing to Gen Z and to new first-time customers. They're clearly iterating. They do a lot of ads. I don't know if everyone also saw their YouTube page, and they can see, like they've got like 30 versions of like 3 ads. And you can tell they're A/B testing these things. And a lot of them are quite good. Some of them I think can use improvements, but many of them are quite good, and I'd rather them iterate and then figure out what works so they can really expand that. I compare that to, I like to pick on Root for their marketing side because I don't see any of their YouTube videos on marketing really. And, I think they need to refresh their brand or something, but not every company has a good sense of brand and how to design and do, build a brand, build something that resonates with customers. And Lemonade is really trying, and I believe succeeding at iterating their ads and finding ads that work, that convert customers. And I think that's pretty important in insurance, because in insurance, it's a very boring product at face value, and you're trying to create something that gets people's attention to remember your brand. I love Lemonade. I've said before, I love Lemonade branding. I mean, think about Gen Z. Are they excited about the brand State Farm, Farmers Insurance? I don't know. They all have farm in their brand name. I don't think that's like
I just posted on my profile Jake's post, so you can check it out.
Awesome, thanks, Tim. Yeah, and when we upload this to YouTube, I'll try and post links to all these things so people can see what we're talking about. So, yeah, I think Lemonade, like for their size, they're only they're under 3 billion market cap today. And I don't know any other company under 3 billion market cap that has as good of branding and as good of marketing for consumer-facing companies as them. I believe they're in a class in their own at this size. And they're acting like a company that's like over 50 billion market cap at least in terms of branding and advertising.
10 million customers for that platform. Like they're punching above their weight right now.
Yeah.
I have to watch these ads. They look interesting. Is that World of Warcraft on the top right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the scale of like these types of ads and using data to determine, like, you're going to make 100 ads, you're going to use data to figure out what the best ones are performing, and it's going to be different for different customers. Like, everyone who's on TikTok sees a different ad. So you need to be able to scale up and make these ads in an efficient way, and obviously use data to drive who sees what. But I don't know how well the incumbents will be with this. Like, I'm sure they can hire, PR firms that are trying to use technology to do the same type of thing. But presumably, there's an advantage of having it more in house.
Yeah, what I see from competitors is they're kind of lazy in general, not always, but in general in terms of advertising. And they've had great campaigns, like Geico, I think, has had some great campaigns. They're quite good at advertising overall. But they have a huge balance sheet, and they just kind of revert to, how do we use our balance sheet to create ads? Like State Farm uses Arnold Schwarzenegger in their ads before a Super Bowl. They're all doing Super Bowl commercials. They're spending tons of money. They're hiring celebrities to do things. They're not quite as thrifty and small scale. Many of them do social media ads still because they're trying to be comprehensive, but I just don't think that their brand itself, like, maybe their brand itself, don't resonate as well. Like, many of them, I think Allstate partnered with, like, I don't know, was it Allstate? I think partnered with Peyton Manning, and they just do like football, and we're like, all right, we're just gonna try and go after like the football audience, American football for all our Europeans in the space today. And they just try and go for like the easy low-hanging fruit, but that's quite expensive for them to do. So
I'd be interested to know how much of Legacy Insure's marketing budgets go towards these digital channels like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook,
Exactly.
Twitter.
Well, in Jake's post, he's saying that he has visibility on the Meta platform to see 250 plus ads from Lemonade. So if he can see,
250?
yeah, in Jake's post. So if he can see Lemonade, surely he can see Progressive and Geico's ads on that platform as well.
yeah,
Any data nerds out there?
It used to be that if you, I'm not sure if it's like this today, but there was a time where if you go to a Facebook page of any business, Meta or Facebook at the time would actually disclose any ads that are running for that business. I don't think that's still the case now, but maybe Jake's able to see it somehow. And that kind of gives you a hint.
Jake's in the business, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, he said he spent a big amount on ads.
Well, I kind of want to move to another subject now, because we did cover marketing some in the last episode. So, Neil, is there anything else on your mind that you wanted to talk about, new subjects? I know there was also kind of a bearish article that was posted recently in the community.
Yeah, I saw it. It's funny. I saw a tweet from Paper Bag on this. He's like, "Oh man, I can't remember his exact words, but the sentiment was these same points are getting a little old." But I guess we've been in this story for so long, so it makes sense. But this whole idea that I think, just to reinforce, I think everyone here probably knows this already, but they're spending money now because there's a massive ROI on that customer spend, and so they're not going to grow revenue as much as they're growing marketing expenses right now, but it's coming. Is that fair to say, Brian? Like, it's coming, right?
Yeah. I want to think.
It's like a timeline thing. People are like too focused on what's in front of us in the next quarter.
Definitely. I want to focus kind of like on bear psychology for a bit. And I think what we see often is some people, I like to get a lot of information before I really solidify my opinion on a business. I can feel like, okay, there is something I don't want to like, and I want to understand what is going on. And I can say, all right, I don't like the net income number. I need to know more about this to really turn into a bullish opinion on a stock. But I feel like there's a lot of bear psychology where they start with the financial statements, and then they form their opinion, and they will state their opinion publicly and just kind of make up their mind on the spot there about the business. And I feel like this is the case in one of the recent bear articles that we saw. Is this individual, they were on a Misc stream, and they kind of like spent, it appears that they spent a couple of minutes looking at the financial statements and just decided to roll with the bearish opinion. And the problem with doing that and forming an analysis too early is you kind of create a point where you're locking yourself into being bearish, and you kind of have face to say, like, you know, if you change your mind, it kind of looks like you're inconsistent or something, and like you didn't do proper due diligence at first. So instead, people's natural reaction is to like dig in and look for more bearish points to kind of reinforce their initial statement. And I think that's a lot of what I see with these bearish opinions, rather than collecting information, asking questions, and then after they kind of have the full, you know, a decent understanding, then kind of creating their bull or bear stance. And it's very easy for bears just to look at net income and saying, all right, net income isn't positive. Therefore, I feel confident I can at least have some bearish opinion. So that's kind of like my initial thoughts on a lot of bear psychology.
Yeah, I think you also highlighted something I think is very important as well, where people get stuck on their opinions of it, you know, and they feel like they have to be consistent, and changing their mind is somehow a bad thing. And I really do think that for a lot of the people who are bears of the company, maybe when they see it in the numbers and, you know, it hits them in the face, like PB said, you know, they'll change their tune. But I still struggle sometimes to like pinpoint exactly what it is. Like if there's one thing you could sort of point out to them that's like, hey, have you thought about this, to sort of get them to rethink how they think about the company. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Brian, what do you like? What do you think about what are they missing? What do you think is
Well,
at the sort of core of it?
first, I think you have to separate people who I believe are more, I don't know what the word here. They're not, they're personalities, and they're creating content for people. You know, a lot of times people on like
True.
TV shows or, you know, like cable news, that's kind of what they do. They create content for people. And I'm not,
It's kind of funny actually when you look at it that way.
I'm not trying to be insulting or anything here, but you know,
Entertaining.
it's definitely, you know, like it's people want to listen to other people talk about businesses, and there is value there, even if it's not investing value, you know, entertainment value and other kinds of value. And I feel like some people, that's like their main thing is, in some cases, they just want to hear your opinion on X, Y, and Z. And that is not necessarily investing, because when you're thinking about things as an investor, you're not thinking about just talking to an audience and just, you know, giving them something to listen to. As an investor, you're trying to get a return. You're trying to get a return on your investment. And when you're trying to get a return on an investment, your entire point of your analysis is really is like trying to understand the business. If your initial take is wrong, and you find out your initial take is wrong later, you want to change your opinion as an investor, and you will buy or sell based on that. Whereas again, if you're like a public facing person, that's not necessarily what you want to do, because then people may think, oh, you know, you're kind of flip-flopping your stance. You don't really know what you're talking about. And I think in reality, investors don't have 100% hit rate. So we have to change our mind now and then. And we have to realize that, oh, we got something wrong, and we need to move from that. I mean, even Warren Buffett doesn't have 100% hit rate. I mean, he bought companies that he thought was bullish on, and then it turns out they weren't. And I'm sure he passed on companies that he probably did have enough information on, but did turn out to be great. So, so you kind of have to separate the two, I believe.
So do you want to move on to a different topic? Because there's something I wanted to maybe talk about, but I think this might be moving on too quickly. It's about their next earnings as far as messaging.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so their next earnings as far as messaging, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I'll let you lead.
I'm a little bit surprised they haven't announced the date by now. I think when you look at the last couple of years, they've announced it by this point. If I'm not mistaken, somebody posted, and I saw it was I think it was the 14th, and now we're at the 16th. So I do wonder when it'll be. I remember being in July once and in August once, if I'm not mistaken. So probably end of the month. But as far as like, I don't know, I don't have any sense of like the numbers specifically, but as far as what I'm expecting to see, I think
Yeah,
interestingly, we've got a lot of, sorry to cut you off there. I think interestingly, we've got a lot of information directly on Twitter as far as the things that are going on. Like if you look at how Daniel responded to Matt, where he said this was an election totally on our part. I really do wonder sometimes if like every analyst has seen that, and if this might be a question that they have on the call or leading up to it. And then at the same time, this whole thing about Loco, like we've got a lot of information from them on these two things, which I'm sure they're going to want to reiterate. I hope they would on the earnings letter, right?
yeah, and I think analysts will really pick up a lot on the reinsurance change because they're insurance analysts and they kind of understand that is a change. I don't think analysts will focus too much on Loco, even though as investors may want to focus on it because we see the benefit, but these analysts are not, the tech analysts that look at SaaS companies. They're the insurance analysts. So, so they focus on that kind of thing.
When do you think we'll see the first AI analyst assigned to Lemonade? Any ideas? Tim, any ideas?
Probably when they're at like 10 billion market cap.
10 billion?
I don't know when that will be. It could be sooner rather than later. But yeah, I just, it needs more. I think when there is the momentum there and people really see the profitability there, then which is coming soon, that's the point where more kind of analysts that are focused on innovative companies will come in, not just traditional insurance analysts. As far as like the date goes, why they haven't reported or their call date, I think it's because there's so much information that they have to cover. I think they're it'll take them more time to prepare for this call than normal calls. I think because the reinsurance change is such a big change, they want to make sure they cover everything. There's a lot going on with car. There's
this is an enormous update, right?
Yeah, it's a big update. They're going through kind of an inflection point with growing car, and they want to determine what message. There's so many messages that they could focus on, and generally they only want to focus on like one or two messages at most per quarterly call, even though they can cover anything. Like we saw in previous years and quarters, like they focused on their investor letter most of it was about like their European expansion and things like that. So they kind of alternate every quarter in what they want to focus on. And so I expect that's why we haven't gotten the call quite scheduled quite yet.
You think we'll have another one of these before the call?
We may have to delay the call. We may have to.
Yeah, I would. If that happens, we should.
Yeah, and maybe we'll do like a quick like earnings preview, like one, and then things we're looking at. We could cover that now if I don't know if we still have some time.
Hey, I gotta drop, but good chatting.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate your insights today. I guess, do you want to talk about what you're looking forward to knowing about in the upcoming call?
I mean, I think it's a lot of the things you just mentioned right there, right? It's an update on car, like just a sort of rehashing of what are your plans? What are you thinking as far as, pace of rollout and pace of, how fast you're going to grow this line. But to be fair, I think they're going to try to just keep it methodical and just grow sort of patiently and not risk the bad part of, this, what could be a wild ride. And so I think that just makes so much sense for them, right? Like so they're not going to grow fast. It's going to take a while, but again, it would just be good to hear an update on exactly what their thinking is. The other thing is obviously the gross loss ratio, because before the Cali wildfires, we saw it dip to 59% ex-cat. And if they are in fact going to continue maybe moving their portfolio away from cat more and more just to reduce the volatility, I think that will be a good thing. And again, that's just another thing that reinforces the doubling down for pet and renters. Let me see what else. I mean, yeah, they're going to return to. They should be returning to operating cash flow profitability, right?
Yeah, I expect, and it depends on their cat. I haven't looked at, I think Progressive, did they just report today or recently? We probably have insights there on their cat exposure, but I haven't looked at it yet. So that kind of determines how much free cash flow that they've generated. The gross loss ratio does. What I kind of look at the most is I want to see the trend for gross loss ratio overall, and then ex-cat. I think ex-cat kind of shows, the cat is seasonal variability basically, and it's going to change from quarter to quarter. Obviously, if there's consistent cat, you kind of have to price it in, and cat is a real part of the loss ratio, so you can't ignore it. It's an important part of it. But if we see gross loss ratio ex cat go down, it's a good sign that overall their pricing is quite solid. And I like to look at things from a TTM or trailing 12-month basis because of the variability. It smooths out the variability. So like one quarter you might have, the LA fires. The next quarter you don't really have anything going on. The next quarter you may have a little bit of hurricane stuff going on. So it kind of smooths it out. And I think TTM, you want to look at everything. You don't want to exclude cat. You want to consider everything because they're, the point of insurance is covering extreme events, and extreme events are some of the biggest costs. So I'll be looking at TTM, gross loss ratio. I'm not going to focus too specific on one quarter. If you have like 4 quarters in a row where it's amazing or it's not amazing, that's something I want to know. And then in specific, I mentioned this earlier today, is I want to see what the car gross loss ratio is. Is it going up substantially as they scale? Because I expect some new business penalty for the non-cross self, and I want to see a sustained kind of maximum to that gross loss ratio with the new business penalty. I'm also interested in seeing how Europe scales. I see their gross loss ratio was kind of high last quarter for Europe, but they did scale it massively last quarter. So I assume that's new business penalty. So I want to see, does that start coming down a little bit, or are they still keeping their foot like way on the pedal, and the penalty will still remain high until those customers have renewed? So those are like the main things I'm looking at, and then just any new announcement and new insights that they give us around anything in general.
Yeah.
Usually every quarter they give us something new, and it's something maybe we didn't expect that they would cover, but they did, and it gives us something to really look into.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get more on L2, this loco thing.
Yeah, you remember Shai used to, every time they came out with like a new model improvement, Shai would always tweet or post about like the new model. I haven't seen that as recently. Perhaps.
I noticed that as well.
Yeah, perhaps that's kind of tied to like the focus was on this loco system overall, and that's what they've been geared toward.
If I'm not mistaken, we were supposed to actually get a L2, which is loco, update at Investor Day, but then I'm not, again, I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure they skipped that. We didn't really hear much about it. Anything at all.
Shai kind of hinted that it was something that was kind of in the works that they would reveal. Perhaps it wasn't like quite finished yet, or they were, really putting the polishing touches on that. And they touched a lot at Investor Day. Like we got to see a lot. We got to see like Blender doing some live improvements. We got to see a lot more about the telematics. And it was a great presentation. And it probably would have been too much really if they also added loco on top of it, just based on the amount of things they covered.
They have a lot of things going well for them right now. I feel like for the company, they're just well positioned. I've been posting about this. I don't know if I should bring this up in this sort of forum, but one of the things I don't like to be invested in is a business that's not firing on all cylinders. And I feel like Lemonade is at that stage right now where at least they're signaling they're ready to do with this reinsurance reduction. Of course, there's some risk that remains to be seen as far as how this actually plays out in the numbers. You know, if you think as well, like if this California thing happened a year later, you know, they'd be in a much different situation. I'm not sure if, actually, I should probably look into that, but you know what that number would have been if the reinsurance was 20% versus the 55%. So, you know, there's obviously going to be some risk, but again, I think this really does fall back to, and I don't know this for sure. I'm suspecting this is what they're doing, at least to some extent. I don't know if they're like in full doing this whole thing, but like, you know, it's about like portfolio optimization. So if you think about the different products on like a per dollar basis of premium, there's a different RBC requirement, risk-based capital requirement. So I did this exercise with, I think it was GPT 4.5 and Grok, not heavy, but just the normal Grok 4. And the numbers that came back, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 1 to 1.5 for pet and renters, and like 2 to 2.5 for home. So if you just think about on like a per dollar of premium policy basis, them utilizing more of that amount on their balance sheet for home means that they have to keep a higher amount of risk-based capital separately allocated for, you know, this regulatory purpose. And so it, you know, it might be that they decide to really pursue this whole portfolio optimization thing and just really I mean, it's really no different than just saying diversify, because really that's what they're doing as well, right? They're just really making that home part of their portfolio as small as possible so that they can focus it on, you know, where they're getting the most amount of benefit, which is pet and renters, where they can get the sort of behavioral data and they have the lowest risk-based capital requirements per
Yeah.
dollar. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So home, my assumption is that home has the highest risk-based capital requirement. I looked at Root has like a $16 million risk-based capital number, and then Lemonade I think was like 38 million or so. But Root has way more, or a substantial amount more in total premiums than Lemonade does right now. So that tells you that Car has less risk-based capital requirements. However, so the other thing about risk-based capital is insurers generally want you to have at least 200% that RBC ratio. Lemonade has about 600% right now. And for Root, there's actually, it's kind of interesting. Apparently, some states are telling Root that they need to keep like 700% the risk-based capital, not 200%. I don't know why that is. That's something more I would need to investigate.
Product specific, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like this. I mean, it's state specific. So I'm not too familiar with that individual, with those individual states or their requirements. You know, the funding for individual states, risk-based capital allocated to individual states or things like that. But my general assumption is that Car would require less risk-based capital than home does, and the same with the percent ratio. Like,
yeah,
and that's good for Lemonade scaling because they're not looking at scaling home massively. They're kind of dropping the policies that they don't like there and just offering it to really the best of the best customers. Like, I looked at the process for signing up for home, and they ask for a lot of information right now. Like, you can't just like click home and be like, sign me up for home, and then it's like 3 clicks. It is not like that. Like, they want to know, you know, is your countertop made of granite? You know, do you have, you know, what is your foundation made of? Is your home on a slope? Is it on a straight angle? You know, obviously questions about your roof, but so many questions. And I think they're kind of saving home for later, because there's just a home is a very high, kind of like high risk, high reward kind of product, because there is so much risk-based capital tied down that you do need a lot of information on those to price it as best as you can.
Yeah. And so many steps for a repair, and they're just so big, right? The severity is so high.
Yeah.
It makes it like, I totally understand their strategy of parking home for now and just waiting until they have. I mean, again, I don't know for 100% certain that this is the case, but it seems like, well, I think Daniel also said they'll do it if it makes sense. So if the math adds up, they'll do it. But if they feel like it's it's unnecessary amount of risk, I suspect that they'll keep trying to offload some of these home policies and just getting that volatility down. That's what I would hope anyway, right? With 20% reinsurance now. That makes sense, right? That over the next year, they continue this exercise of getting rid of some of these riskier home policies that are, have any sort of risk to cat areas. Like, I wonder how many policies they have left in California, and what are the odds that another wildfire sort of event happens?
Yeah, and many insurers are not writing new policies in California just because of the regulators. One thing I like about Lemonade is that they are multi-policy versus some companies that only focus on one area. That gives them a lot of, in this growth phase where Lemonade is still growing, that gives them a lot of flexibility to follow and grow the products in the geographies that are best to really get the most profitability. So, compared to some other insurtechs that are focused on single line, they have no choice but to grow a product, even if it's not a favorable environment for that product. So if you're only doing home and there are issues around home at the moment, then you're kind of SOL. But if you're Lemonade, you can focus on pet, you can focus on renters, you can focus on renters in Europe, you can focus on car. Perhaps there's some states where home is good to expand, and you can expand there. So there's just a lot of flexibility, and that creates a more durable business, basically, when you're small and scaling.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're about an hour and a half in. Were there any other topics we wanted to cover before we close this episode out?
I mean, I think we've covered quite a lot today. There was a request to go over like the insurance terminology. We will do that at some point when we have nothing else to cover, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll go over it. And if you're listening to this episode and you really have an insatiable desire to learn today, I would recommend going to like a Lemonade, download a 10K from their website. And generally, you will see a list of terms and how Lemonade describes them and what that term means in specific for their business. So if you can just like search the document for like something like risk-based capital or X, Y, and Z, you'll kind of see, I believe toward the end, their description of what each of those things mean.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
Well, I think we're pretty good. We got through an hour and a half here. So yeah, I'm happy. You want to wrap this up?
Yeah. I think it's a good time. Hour and a half. It's perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in today. I believe we'll try and schedule again. Not next week, but the week after that for episode.
We'll wait till after earnings.
Yeah. Or
makes sense.
All right. Until after earnings, assuming we get one, not too long. If you have anything you want us to cover in that, or any things around earnings you specifically want us to go over, please send a message to Neil or me and let us know. This episode will also be uploaded to YouTube and Spotify, hopefully by the end of tomorrow. So everyone who did not get the full conversation today can listen in. And also a reminder, nothing here is financial advice. We are not your financial advisors. So keep that in mind.
Nice. Nicely done. All right. Thanks very much, guys.
All right. Cheers, everyone. See you next time.
Have a good one.